Got my first coat of poly spray on, and that turned out really nice. That was the first one that's really turned out nice to start off with. Weather cooled off quite a bit. It's I don't know whether it even reached 60 today or not. It might have been right around 60, a little bit more. But anyway, it was a lot cooler, and I mixed up the poly spray and a little bit more reducer, but not much. It was pretty much 4 to 1, like it said. It went on really good. I added a little something here to the spray booth. I noticed that when I was sanding the fuselage, the fabric there, the poly brush that got screwed up, and then when I go over it with a rag with acrylic clean on it, I could feel the hairs on my arm stand up and pull towards the fabric. I knew it was, of course, you generate static electricity rubbing on that thing and everything. So anyway, I found a steel rod and drove in the ground up there through the floor, a big crack in the floor right there. And then I just got a set of jumper cables and hooked onto that, and then hooked onto that rotisserie up there where it bolts into the airframe. I don't know whether that does any good to dissipate the static electricity or not. I could still feel it on my arms when I was washing the fuselage here before I painted it this time, but can't hurt any, I guess. So there's the first coat. Let it set up overnight here, and then prep up tomorrow and put another coat on there. Well, it was hot and dry. Actually, it was cold, and then it was hot and dry, and now it's got cool again. It's down to 55, but it's been a drought here. I think the drought's broken. Hope my road don't wash away. There's the rain coming off the roof of the house. Hitting so hard it's bouncing up in the air, probably 6 feet. Perfect weather for applying poly spray. We got my second coat of poly spray on, and that one went really nice. The first coat of poly spray had some lumps and stuff on it, mostly from the poly brush before, even though I'd sanded it down a little bit. Some of the stuff still showed through, and it may or may not have picked up some stuff when I sprayed it, but I've cleaned this booth out really good and went over it multiple times with, well, I sanded it all down and got it smoothed out pretty good, and then washed it down with some water this time. That's the first time I've done that, and then washed it down with acrylic clean, and then each time I would spray a section, I'd wipe it down with a tack cloth, and it wind up going through a lot of tack cloths. It picks up the overspray and stuff and kind of fills the tack cloth up. But I had one bug land on it, but it landed on it late enough that it was pretty much set up. Its legs stuck to it, but it come off with the tack cloth okay. And I got one hair in it on the top, and I wiped that off and then sprayed it again. And I thought it was going to have to be sanded out, but after it all flowed out, it actually looks pretty good there where I'd wiped that out. I just wiped it off with a rag and kind of smeared it, and then resprayed it, and everything flowed out pretty good. So there's a couple of fingers there, a couple of pinks that are kind of lifted a little bit. Otherwise, everything looks really good. So we'll wait for it to set up overnight and see how it looks tomorrow, and then maybe sand it and touch it again with the sandpaper just a little bit, and do the third coat, and that'll be the last coat of poly spray. Well, I'm about ready for my third and hopefully my final coat of poly spray. I just went over it with sandpaper. That second coat came out really nice. I was really happy with it, but there's still a few places where there was some pimples and stuff sticking out from that first coat of poly brush, and then there was one spot where there was a little bit of a run on there on the back where I got it just a little too heavy. And anyway, I went over the whole thing with sandpaper, with 400 grit sandpaper, and then around those places like the lift handles and gear attach fittings. There gets a little bit of spatter and stuff around them, but just little like BBs or little teeny balls. Anyway, I've got those all sanded down, and then I went over it with damp cloth. That makes a big difference on getting it cleaned up. Well, first I went over with the air hose and blew everything off, and blew out my paint booth, and got all the loose dust and everything stirred up and blowed out around here. Anyway, that saves a lot on the acrylic clean. So I went over the whole thing with acrylic clean again, and I would only use one rag this time. And before, I was going through 3 or 4 of those for each time I cleaned this airframe up, and this time I just went over it with one piece of Scotch-Brite. Barely picked up any of the sanding dust or any dirt at all, so that's pretty good. So we'll let this acrylic clean off. We'll go work on something else for a little while. Let this stuff flash off for a while and everything dry out in here, and then mix up some more poly spray and come and give it hopefully its last coat. Well, the final coat of poly spray is on. It went on really nice. It looks really good. The first cross coat, when I was doing the bottom, a bug or something, I don't remember what it was, got in one spot there before I could get over it. When I wiped it off with a rag, and then I sprayed over it, I thought it was going to have to go over it with the sander or the sandpaper and sand it out and recoat it again, but it blended in real nice once I got spread that new paint over it. It just blended in real nice. And then on the final coat, same thing up on the top, just the last little bit there when I first started the top, something got in there. I wiped it out, sprayed a little bit on there. I got a little bit too much and got a run on it, and I wiped it off. I sprayed it again, and it came out real good. So anyway, that's the third and final coat of poly spray. Well, now I'll let it flash out for a few days. I have to check and see how long. I think if I was putting polytone on there, like that's the regular type of paint, I'd go ahead and paint it right on there, because that uses the same paint and solvents and everything as this stuff does. But I'm going to coat it over with polyurethane paint, and that stuff kind of seals everything in, so I want to make sure all the solvents and everything get flashed off before I finish coating it. And the next step on here, I'm going to paint the upper part of the door frame black, and the same thing on the inside of the fuselage where the wing spar goes across there. I'm going to paint that black. Those are both going to be exposed on the inside a little bit, and then we'll unmask all of the stuff that I want to get painted with the finish color, the gear fittings and the handles, the lift handles, and then back here on the tail where this tail post is, all that will be unmasked so it can be painted with the finish color.